Fantastic. So, yeah, thanks for joining us, everyone, for this presentation by Freedom Personal Safety of the work that they've been doing as part of Right to the Streets. Right to the Streets is a project that's been exploring ways to make streets and public spaces of North Trafford safer, more welcoming, and more joyful places for women and girls. It's been carried out by a partnership made up of Greater Manchester Moving, Trafford Council, ourselves at Open Data Manchester, and other organisations like Publica, Mike Media, Diva Creative, and Freedom Personal Safety. It's been delivered with money from the Home Office Safer Streets Fund, which has been sort of made to address the fact that concerns about safety on the streets has been shown to be a key barrier to women and girls enjoying physical activity, active travel and sports. So as part of this project, Freedom Personal Safety were commissioned to deliver a series of bystander training sessions to residents, organisations, and I'm joined today by Julie, who's going to share a bit about what they did, the hows and whys, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll hand over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Sam, and hello, everybody. It's lovely to have you all here today, and thank you for giving me this chance to chat to you a little bit about what we've been doing, really, and share a bit of the content of what we've been doing. This is the clumsy bit now. I get my slides loaded up. Okay, so yes, so Freedom Personal Safety. As you look at the screen, you are seeing the whole of Freedom Personal Safety. There's two of us. We are two friends. There's me on the right and Elaine on the left. We set up Freedom Personal Safety 15 years ago to address the issue of violence against women and girls. I know that's a big ask for a couple of mates, and we're not, we have to be realistic about what we can achieve. But do you know what? We've been punching well above our weight for 15 years now, and we're still here, so that's a good sign. So in that time, we're a community interest company, so we're non-profit making. We work a lot in partnerships with schools, colleges, universities, communities, groups, employs anyone we can work with who are interested in share the same goals as us. We work with them. So we run, I was in Gloucester yesterday at the university running self-defence and personal safety workshops for over 100 women students. We do lots of stuff around healthy relationships and consent. And actually sexual harassment awareness has been a big focus of our work for about the last 4 years or so. We started over in Huddersfield University and working with the colleges there. I'm actually based in Huddersfield. I'm speaking to you from West Yorkshire across the Pennines. And Elaine is based in Trafford. So when this project came up, it was just, this really, really fits in with what, I guess, right up our street, to use a very terrible pun. It really fitted in with what it is we do and what we're interested in. And we're increasingly interested in how communities can feel safer when individuals take action. So, yes, we've been running about 25 training sessions now, I think we've done. On the whole, they tend to be about 2.5 3-hour training sessions where we look at sexual harassment awareness, what is sexual harassment, the impact it has, and just some discussions around our views and opinions on it and experiences, and just having that really lovely interaction that you get when you bring people together. And then talking about practical steps we can take as bystanders. And we're going to touch on a little bit of that in this session. There you can see me with some fantastic coaches and staff at the Manchester United Foundation who work with kids and young people right across Greater Manchester. Brilliant group of people. And what was great was I was able to share with them the content that we've created for this. And then I basically gave them the slides and said, go and share this with all the kids and all the young people and all the communities you work with. So we've worked with Manchester United Foundation, Lancashire Cricket Club, Transport for Greater Manchester, again, where I ran sessions with managers and give them all the materials so they can then share them out across. I think there's 1,000 staff at Transport for Greater Manchester. And they're so key in terms of getting the message out, of realising and understanding the impact of sexual harassment, and really that key role as bystanders when they're there and they witness things or things happen on the transport network. Because we know that one of the issues that women and girls spoke about in the research was not only going outside, but also traveling to events and going places. So, you know, having that link with Transport for Greater Manchester was brilliant. So I'm really pleased with that. We worked with school nurses. We worked at the wonderful Gorse Hill Studios, a real kind of youth hub in North Trafford. We're working with Trafford College next week, the domestic abuse charity TDAS. We've trained teachers in schools. The project wasn't actually aimed at working with younger people and children. We do a lot of that work, freedom, personal safety. But for the remit of this project, we felt we'd rather reach the kind of teachers and the gatekeepers so then they can share it. So yes, we're lots and lots of amazing people, and the response has been fantastic. So, active bystander. What's an active bystander? It's quite a kind of it's one of those kind of buzz terminology things, isn't it? So basically, a bystander is someone who sees something, and if you're an active bystander, you do something about what you've just seen. So it's that recognizing that someone's being targeted. And when we ran our sessions, and I'm not going to do this today because we haven't got time, but and I'm guessing a lot of you will kind of understand this whole concept of sexual harassment and the implications of it. But yeah, we often talk about in our sessions what is sexual harassment, because people have got different views on what it is and what's acceptable and what isn't. And I love that. I think some of you on this session now actually have been to some of our sessions, and that chance to kind of share views and opinions, I think. And it's not about me telling people what sexual harassment means to them individually, because it's quite a personal thing, but we can share the definition and talk about the implications, but recognizing that something isn't okay and then doing something. And that's the bit for a lot of us where our kind of heart sinks, isn't it? What am I going to do? Does that mean I'm going to get involved in this? Does that mean I'm going to get punched? It's, you know, I don't want to come face up to somebody who's being very offensive to somebody else. But actually, there are quite subtle things we can do, and there's different courses of action we can take. So I'm going to share those with you. Being an ally, and we all like to think we're allies of other people, don't we? But I think one of the really fascinating things that's come out of the sessions we've run, and I'm going to share with you like a little case study, a real case study I'm going to share with you shortly. And some people have said, do you know what? When I'm out and about, say I'm on the bus or I'm on the tram or I'm on the train, I don't often look up. I'm often on my phone, so I wouldn't notice. I wouldn't see if something was going on, unless it was, you know, really noisy or the big hoo-ha. And a lot of people have said, you know what? I'm actually now going to pay more attention of what's going on around me. And it's really interesting, isn't it, that sometimes we can get caught up in our own selves and our own little world and our phones. I mean, our phones open up a whole world, but sometimes we're quite removed from the actual physical space we're in. And actually, there are times when we want to do that. We want to lose ourselves, but just looking up now and again and just taking in what's going on around us. You know, as a personal safety specialist, we're all about situational awareness and taking in how we're responding to things around us. But for other people too, I think now and again, it's being that ally and just looking out for others. I might feel fine and I might feel safe, but just to glance up, just to see what's going on in my environment. Possibly getting other people involved. You know, I mentioned like Transport for Greater Manchester, getting staff involved. If there are people working in the space that we're in, reporting it if we can. Again, we'll talk about that, and supporting that person who's experiencing that. So, I'm going to bring you on to this is the kind of the case study that we use in the session. So what we say is, and I think a lot of us can imagine this. So we're on the tram, and you can see the picture there of the tram. It's not really busy, but there are a few people around. Young woman gets on. She's on her own. She's standing there holding on to one of the poles. A man gets on and stands close to her too close. Yeah, there's plenty of space around there. And I think for people who've experienced this, when someone is deliberately standing close to them to intimidate them, we know it's done deliberately to intimidate us. It's about taking up our space, and it's about being stared at and being made to feel deliberately uncomfortable. And it's about that kind of power, really. So this woman's in this situation. She clearly, from her body language, is looking uncomfortable. If you're there on the tram and you happen to glance up from your phone and you notice this, so we say this on the sessions, what do you think you would do? And I'm happy for you to, if you want to unmute and say that, or if you want to put something in the chat. Do you know what? Your answer might be, I wouldn't do anything. And that's okay. This is not about me kind of trying to indoctrinate you. This is your duty as a citizen. You know, you can't ignore this. And I'm not saying you would be ignoring it, but actually there's lots and lots of reasons why people don't intervene. So, you know, I don't want you kind of beating yourselves up and thinking I'm a bad person if I don't do something. But, you know, let's just think about what our response to this would be. And of course, you don't have to share anything you're not comfortable sharing. And I know Sam is going to have a quick look at the chat because I can't see it. So I'll just give everyone a moment while I take a sip of water. See if there's anything coming through. Maybe if you want, you can put your hand up if you want to unmute yourself to oh, I can see the chat. That's exciting.
Yeah, Louise has just put a comment in. I'll read it. It says, I might ask her, excuse me, I love your shoes. Where did you get them? I might give the guy a bit of a look, but not overtly aggressive. Liz says, offer her a seat.
Great. I love both of those. I love the where did you get your shoes. I'm sure that's the kind of thing I would say. I'm always telling random people in the street that I like what they're wearing, or absolutely. So what you're doing, Louise, and actually Liz too, you are making a connection with that young woman. You are letting her know, I see you, I see this situation. You are not on your own. It's what we call the distract technique. So offering her a seat. Now, you might think, you know, some people have said this to me. Well, she stood up there, she's got legs. Why can't you go and just sit down? Actually, sometimes when we're in that situation, we can kind of get a bit of a freeze response, or I don't move because if I move, what if he follows me? So there's lots and lots of things probably going on in this young woman's head. So if someone says, oh, there's a seat here, would you like to sit down? That is a way out. That's a kind of, yes, I feel safe now and I can go and sit down. So yeah, both of these are distract methods and I love these. Yes, actually, I can see the chat now, Sam, so that's great. So Louise, yeah, engage with her. Absolutely. Let them know I'm there. So she doesn't feel, because when this happens to you, you can feel very kind of isolated and you're being targeted, and that can feel very, very lonely. So knowing that someone's seen you and got your back is massive. Brilliant.
So it would depend on who I was with, but
yes,
there was one experience that we had recently on the tram, and I was with my wife, and because we had a perception that if I went in as a man, I might increase the aggression that was already there. So because she was happy to, I actually just, I was away from the entire interaction, but I was present in case my wife wanted me, but she went in, and she's tiny and therefore less threatening. I mean, she can hold her own, but
I bet she can. Really interesting, Ben. Thank you for that, and thank you to you both for the action that you took to support in that situation. It's really interesting, and again, we do explore this on the longer sessions, how we identify and how we relate to the people involved in the situation. It's really fascinating. And absolutely, what felt kind of safer and less threatening in your situation, Ben, was that your wife making that kind of contact with her. And I know that some of the guys that have come on the training have said, actually, we have to, I want to tread quite carefully here. I don't want to go in and be seen to be kind of, going in a kind of macho way. I'm not sure you would have done that, Ben, but do you know what I mean? Going in and that kind of like a man squaring up against a man. And this young woman actually might not want another man involved in this scenario. So that sensitivity is really very special and really important. So thank you for doing that. And how we identify and how we relate to people often, I guess, instructs how we respond to a situation. So it was really nice then that you were both there, but you were then there for kind of backup to support your wife and that other person. Thank you for that, Ben. Okay, so thank you to everyone for sharing your responses to that. So before we go on to kind of practical options, and you've mentioned some of them, we focus in personal safety. So safety first is always really, really crucial. If we feel under any kind of physical or any other kind of threat, really, and we think, you know what, it's not safe for me to get involved in this moment, bear that in mind, in this moment, then you don't get involved. It's really important you don't put yourself or other people in danger. And once you've taken the action, if appropriate, kind of think, how do I then move away? How do I then get away and maybe support the other person that's been targeted? Try to remain calm. We've probably got a bit of adrenaline going through us, or our heart's beating a bit quicker. And we often just kind of, on the notes that we send out, on the training notes after the session, we've kind of just got like a mindful breathing exercise just for a couple of moments, just to slow your heart rate down and just to kind of bring some calm to yourself. And then think about the options you've got. And there's something called the 5 Ds, which is it's like this a kind of methodology created by an amazing organization in the US called Right to Be. They used to be called Hollaback back in the day. I don't know if any of you came across them. And they've developed these 5 Ds, and they're kind of shared. They're globally now. Everyone kind of uses them. And they're not just obviously to be used when we see sexual harassment. It's any kind of, I guess, hate incident or any kind of harassment of anybody else. So the 5 Ds. Distract is our first D. And that's exactly the examples we were given. So it's that, oh, love your shoes. Where are they from? Does this tram stop at Cornbrook? I always get confused on this network. Anything, the start concept. Would you like a seat? Or can you just, whatever it is, drawing attention away from them and disrupting the harassment. That young woman knows what you're doing, but the guy harassing her is probably realised that you're on to him and what's going on too. I've put a picture there of a guy on the tram with a rucksack. Now, the very first training session we ran back in January, there was a guy on there who worked for the council, and a few weeks afterwards, he got in touch to say that this had happened to him. And that's why I use this scenario, because this is his real example. So he was on that tram, saw that young woman, had a rucksack on his back. So he stood up, and he stood very near where the two of them were, and he took off this rucksack in quite an exaggerated way and said, "Oh, sorry, mate," because he actually bumped into the guy. The guy stepped back, and he took off his rucksack and he kind of had it on, and he just stood near the young woman and said, "Is it okay if I stand here?" A nice distance, not really, really close. And after a few moments, the other guy walked off down the tram. Wonderful. Delegate. So what we mean by this one is getting someone else involved. And I guess kind of, Ben, this is what you and your wife were doing. So getting someone else involved. So if I'm with someone, I would probably say to like my friend or my husband, "Oh, have you seen that? Do you think we should go and do something? Should we go in?" Because sometimes if you're kind of on your own and you're thinking, "Am I imagining this? Is this actually going on? Should I get involved in this, or am I making a big scene out of it?" So sometimes it's just nice to say, "What do you think about this?" And And again, you know, I'm thinking about how I identify and who I am. If there was another woman nearby, I think I'm more likely to kind of approach someone, I don't know if they're a woman, than a man. But so I might just say, oh, excuse me, have you seen that there? Do you think they're okay? And I wouldn't do it in a big loud voice, so obviously they can hear what's going on. And if they didn't see, or just tell them, oh, look, have you seen that? They stood very close. You could maybe then go up together and do that distraction technique as well. Or if there's someone at work, let them know. Now, the picture you've got there is a bus, and government research tell us that in terms of public transport, sexual harassment is more likely to happen on a bus than any other form of transport. And what's handy about a bus is that there's a driver there that you can access, which is why, again, I'm so pleased we did the training for the managers at TFGM, Transport for Greater Manchester. I'm not saying that kind of from tomorrow, every single bus driver and every single member of Transport for Greater Manchester staff are going to be on this and trained and know the rest of it. But there's a real willingness to get on board with this. Get on board. Another nice point. But, you know, to really address this. And actually, I'm sure you've seen those the new big yellow buses driving around Greater Manchester, the new franchise. And what they've done as part of that is they've got this whole travel safe approach now, and this whole campaign. And on buses, I think, but they might be on trams too coming soon, actually. But on the buses, I know you're going to have a little QR code on the back of the seat in front of you, and you can rate my journey. And including things like, did you experience any harassment or antisocial behaviour? So there's lots of kind of reporting mechanisms we can use, but particularly on a bus, there's a member of staff there you can go up to. On the train network, you can use 61016. What is it? See it, say it, sort it. And I know British Transport Police are really keen to hear from people experiencing things like harassment, because through the 61016 number, because they can get officers in stations, getting on trains. You know, if you tell them I'm in carriage C and there's a group of guys here who've been drinking and they're calling out offensive things. And I've seen this happen, and I know that there's definitely police officers stationed at the bigger stations, but they can actually get to then other stations too, and they can speak to them and they can take the action necessary. So yeah, delegate is our second D. Then we're on to document. So what we mean by this is, let's imagine I'm on the tram and I'm witnessing this and I've got my phone with me. I might not want to go up and speak to the woman who's being targeted. There might not be anyone else I feel comfortable kind of approaching. But what I can do is I can get my phone out, get my notes app, and I can just make a few notes about the description of this guy, where he got on, date and time now. And maybe, you know, if there's anything, maybe he's got a lanyard on from an organisation he works at, I might make a note of that, and just kind of document this incident. And even kind of doing that's kind of quite a statement really about how this isn't okay. The other thing I could do is, and I could do this covertly or I could do it openly. So covertly, I could just pretend I'm kind of just checking my hair, you see how things are going, and if my sound is off, I could take a photo, or I can even be recording it. Or I can do it quite overtly to kind of, you know, I see you, I'm recording this, I'm getting a photo of this. Again, it's got to be what feels right with you on that particular day in that particular situation. And then if you have the opportunity to, I could let that young woman, I can just say, you know, if the guy gets off, I made these notes, or I took this photograph and I've got this video, you know, you can report this now. Or actually you can report it because you are, for example, on that tram, and that behaviour has had an impact on you, and you've noticed it's had an impact on somebody else. So we don't want to be taking photographs of her necessarily, or kind of, because she might not want to report it, but really our focus should be on the perpetrator. Just a quick note of caution: never ever post any photo or video online, never broadcast it, because if there is any kind of prosecution, it can prejudice a case, and also you can get loads of harassment for that. We know what it's like sometimes on kind of local groups and things like that. So yeah. So a very high profile case of bystanders documenting, videoing a horrendous event was a George Floyd murder. George Floyd, black man murdered by a white police officer, who knelt on his neck for more than 9 minutes. And there were people videoing that. And that video evidence was used in court. So yeah. Direct. This is what most of us think of when we think of being an active bystander and doing something. So this is actually going up to this guy and just saying, whoa, stood a bit close there. I think you need to step back a bit. Personal space and all that, you know. Use the kind of whatever kind of terminology, however you would want to approach somebody like that, you know. You're too close. That feels a bit intimidating. Feels a bit like harassment, that you need to step back. So we've got two approaches direct. We can go up to the harasser and we tell them that's not okay. You need to stand back. You need to give us some space. We make statements. With the person who's been targeted, we ask them, can I just ask, are you okay that he stood so close to you? Because that feels a bit intimidating. This is different from distract because we're actually addressing the harassment directly with the person being targeted. We ask them, we tell the harasser. We want the person being targeted to know that we've got a connection with them. So we're inviting them into a conversation, if you like. Are you okay with what's going on here? And then we can always say that kind of, and if they obviously look, again, still looking very uncomfortable, we can say, you can always come and sit next to me, which is kind of building on, I think it was what Liz said earlier about, you know, there's a seat over here. I love sharing this picture of this guy called Max Gutierrez, works in a bar in Miami. And a couple of years ago, he went viral on socials because two women sat at his bar having a drink. And this guy kept coming up to him and coming up to them. And then he'd wander off again. And they were kind of trying to kind of ignore him. And he was just hassling them. And Max got this sense that they weren't comfortable with this. But rather than him kind of jump in and be the hero and assume really what was going on for them and what they wanted to happen, I don't know if you can read it on the screen, but I'll tell you what it says. He got this little clipboard that they use for the bills, and he wrote this note on it. And he says, this guy's bothering you. Put your ponytail on your other shoulder and I'll have him removed. He's giving me the creeps. So he handed it to them, went off to serve somebody else and glanced over, and he saw that one of the women had put a ponytail on her other shoulder. My hair's not long enough, but you get the idea. So he went up to the guy and he said, right, you know, you need to leave. You're hassling my customers, you need to leave. And the guy protested. Anyway, Max got him barred in the end. And the women were so impressed that Max had done this in such a sensitive way. They took a picture of him. And there you go. And I'm still talking about him 2 years later. Now, I'm not saying if you're sat on the tram, you can post a little note across to this woman or, you know, kind of paper aeroplane or something. But it's just about finding ways to connect with that person and giving them that kind of agency and giving them the decision. Do you want me to do something? I'm in a position of authority here. Can I do something to help you? And our fifth one is delay. And this one I think is really, well, I'm going to give my own personal experience when I experienced someone who did a delay response for me. This is after the harassment is finished. So let's go back to our tram example. Let's imagine that she has got off the tram and I'm getting off at the same stop. So he stayed on the tram. She gets off. What I might do then is I might just say, excuse me, I noticed what was happening on the tram there. And I just wanted to say that I thought that was really uncomfortable. You know, I would have felt really uncomfortable in your position. Are you okay? Are you feeling okay? And she might want to talk to you about it. She might not. But you are letting her know what happened was uncomfortable. That wasn't okay. You're okay to feel upset and offended by that. Sometimes we blame ourselves, don't we? Oh, why did I wear this dress? Why didn't I wait for my friend after work? Why did I travel on my own? We try and kind of challenge that. Well, actually call that out. And I understand why we kind of self-blame, I'm not really quite as sympathetic to victim blaming. I think people who victim blame are basically siding with perpetrators. If we blame somebody, well, it's your own fault for travelling on the tram on your own. That's not okay. But I understand why a lot of us do carry that kind of shame and that blame for when it happens to us. But if someone else says, no, that was out of order, it really kind of helps really how we feel about the incident. You might be, depending again on the scenario, I might say, if you want to phone somebody to come and meet you, I'm quite happy to wait. Or I'm walking up to the high street. If you're walking up there, we can walk that way together. And it's interesting, isn't it? If I think back to Ben, it might be fine for me to do that. But let's say Ben had been on the tram on his own without his wife, and he'd gone up. Would you then be able to go up to this young woman and say, "Are you okay? I noticed what happened. Would you like me to walk up to the high street with you?" It's about finding the right way to kind of do it, really, isn't it? But I don't want us to kind of minimize the impact of delay, because it might not seem quite as heroic as some of the others, but it's really powerful. And I'm going to tell you why. So I was walking through Huddersfield. It was pre-pandemic, probably about 4 years ago, something like that. 3 lads. This isn't them. I'm not documenting them. This is just to represent them. Calling out some sexually offensive things as I was walking past. They were across the street, so I didn't think there was a physical threat to me. They were just being idiots. I decided not to respond in the moment, so I just kept looking forward. I didn't respond to them at all. As I'd gone past, there's an older guy, probably in his 70s, walking towards me, and I can hear him saying something. And he's saying, and then I get near and he says, "Are you all right, love?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he said, "I could hear what they were shouting at you." He said, "It was disgusting." He said, "Shouldn't speak to a lady like that." Lady. It was a good day for me. And I said, "Oh no." I said, and then he said, "It wouldn't have happened in my day, you know." We didn't get into the discussion about what it was like in the 70s and 80s, but anyway, bless him. So I said, "No." And he said, "As long as you're all right then, love." And off he passed. Okay. Now that interaction, it was seconds. It was a few seconds. But I've carried that with me. I've remembered that. I'm sharing it with you now. It was really powerful. He didn't need to say anything. He could have just thought all that stuff in his head. He said it to me. He made that connection with me. It made me feel, now, it did make me feel kind of safer in a strange way. Not that he was kind of here to protect me or anything, but he saw it. He was an ally. He recognized it, and he checked in with me. It's a really powerful thing to do. And sometimes if we do feel very threatened by the people, the harassers, it can be more, it can sit better with us in terms of our own personal safety and a way to deal with it. And, you know, some people, you might think, well, actually, this isn't challenging misogyny and this isn't bringing down, you know, all this behaviour. It might not, but well, it probably is. You know, he's not going up to those lads and saying, "You need to stop speaking to women like that. That's disgusting behaviour." Even if he did do that, would it have much of an impact? And actually, there's lots and lots of different approaches to challenging this behaviour. Because of what he did that day, I've shared this. Well, I've been talking about this as long as I've been talking about active bystandership. So at least the last 4 years, I've been talking about this. I've told, do you know what? I'm going to say hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that story. And that might give people the confidence to do something similar. So whilst he's not challenging their behaviour, we're empowering individuals to call these things out. And I do a lot of work with young people, particularly young lads in the area where I work, and lots of other areas, to talk about these kinds of things. So it might be one day I come across these 3 lads one day and we can have a chat. I wouldn't recognise them, and I'm sure they wouldn't recognise me, but it's not necessarily about challenging the whole behaviour that's going on. These small little things that we can do to connect with people, to support people, to be an ally, do all make a difference. So being an ally, there's just a few steps here. This is from a campaign called Walk Like a Woman. You don't actually have to walk like a woman, but it's really about how men in particular can be allies, and women can be allies too, of course. But often what I found in the sessions that we've been running on the Right to the Streets programme and before this is that, most men, vast majority of men, want to be an ally and want to support women, but often kind of don't really kind of have that same kind of experience of feeling threatened by sexual harassment or experience sexual harassment on an ongoing basis. So it's just a few very kind of practical things. So keep your distance if you're out and about. Don't walk up behind somebody who's walking on their own. That could be the same for a guy as well. If it's late at night, guy's walking on his own, walking up directly behind someone might be quite threatening. Don't run up behind from somebody, kind of run round if you can, or just call out, I'm just running through if you're out for a run. Don't stare at somebody. Keep your comments to yourself. With this one, I always like to say, because I love the thing about, I really like your shoes, where are they from? I love connections with people. And I love the fact that we're doing this online, but I'd much rather be in a room with you. But we are connecting in this way. And I think those in-person connections are really, really powerful. And then what make life worth living, aren't they? Connecting with people. So I don't want you to think that I'm saying never ever speak to anybody you don't know, or actually anyone you do know. What I'm saying is it's about that respectful, positive interaction. And if someone doesn't respond to you, if you smile at somebody or say morning to somebody and they don't smile back at you, that's their right not to do that. We don't then go up to them and say, oi, I was being friendly to you, what's the matter with you? Yeah, we need to respect. I'm sure you would. Keep your mates in line. We've seen a lot of kind of campaigns around that, kind of pulling out mates' behaviour. Be an active bystander. You've got those 5 Ds now. Share them with everyone you know. And yeah, keep talking about this. For so long, this kind of behaviour has been normalised and accepted, and we need to kind of change that and say, no, this isn't okay. Let's talk about it. So, Harold Wilson and Huddersfield train station. Why on earth am I bringing him into this? This project finishes, Right to the Streets finishes officially at the end of September, so next week. We have just been awarded funding from Kirklees Council. So that's Huddersfield, Dewsbury, Mirfield, Cleckheaton, West Yorkshire, to run a whole series of active bystander training sessions. So I'm delighted that actually, although our official work as part of Right to the Streets will finish, like I say, I've sent out all those slides and all those notes and all those training things. So I'm hoping it's going to continue for a long time. We're still going to be talking about this, because until there's no need for this, we're going to keep talking about it, raising awareness, bringing people together. Because, there are more good people in the world than bad. And when the good people come together and make small steps, it can have a big impact. Oh, I've talked to you a lot. I'm so sorry. I've kind of just been talking at you. You can see it's my real passion. So thank you for being here and listening. And yeah, let's give someone else a chance to ask some questions. Louise, what a guy. Absolutely. Yeah, he's great. So yeah, do unmute if you want to ask any questions. Thank you, Sam. I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, no problem, Julie. Thank you so much for that presentation. Really, really enjoyed it. And thanks for taking us through, all the 5 Ds and so on. I wasn't expecting to get such an in-depth look in the last hour. So it's really, really generous of you. Yeah, so now we've got a little bit of time for any questions for Julie. I'll kick us off. Actually, before I do that, if anyone does have any questions, you feel free to pop them in the chat box and I can read them out, but you're also very welcome to unmute and just ask yourself. I'm just interested about I attended a really early session, I think back in January. I think we realised that it was so long ago. Yeah, it doesn't seem it. And I just wondered, how did you decide on the content for your sessions? Is this something that you have kind of just developed over the 15 years you've been working, or do you sort of work with the people or organizations, and how does it change in that way? Or
yeah, it depends on who we're working with. So we've done a lot of work with an engineering company over here in Huddersfield, about 300 staff. The main profile of the of the staff there is white men in their 50s, although there are a lot more apprentices coming in from different backgrounds, different races, different genders, non-binary. It's really kind of, it's great because it's really, it's shaking them up a bit, and it's really great. I've done a lot of work with the local college, and one of the apprentices who I'd done some training with, she went to work for this, take up this apprenticeship with this company, and she experienced some sexual harassment. And she said, you need to get Julie in here and speaking to all these blokes in here about what they're doing. So they did. I trained all the staff. We ran anonymous surveys to find out what was going on. And so, and I guess to kind of answer your question, Sam, what we try and do is, you know, I could sit here, sit in my kind of, you know, my desk and say, all of you, wherever you are, you need to understand what I'm telling you, that sexual harassment isn't okay. You shouldn't be doing this, that, and the other. For some people, that's a really long journey to take. Some people have experienced a lot of behaviours as they've been growing up and going through their career, for example, in this, that's been very normalised. So for me to suddenly come up and say everything needs to change is too big of a shock to them. So I kind of have to meet them where they are and bring them to where do you know what I mean? And kind of work our way through this. It's not very much a kind of, here's the doctrine, you've got to sign up to it or leave this organisation. So whilst all the kind of principles that we believe in and that we have are the same, whether we're working with, you know, I work in primary schools, I work with 4 and 5-year-olds, not talking about sexual harassment, but talking about respect and connection and all those kind of things, looking out for each other. I guess it's about adapting it and tailoring it to the people we're working with, so it has meaning for them. I work with them, I share my views and opinions and approaches, and then I ask them to take ownership of it and take it away. So I think that's quite a long wordy answer, but
Right, thank you. Louise, you had your hand up, but it's gone back down again. Is your
yeah, it's still up, so to speak. Julie, thank you so much for that. That was really interesting and really helpful, and I've learned a lot from it, so thank you very much. I think you've kind of already answered my question, actually. What I wanted to know, and I don't know if this to you as well, Sam, and anyone else on the call, is this kind of training being done in schools and colleges in Greater Manchester? Because I think that's really key as well, is getting, you know, boys and girls, young men and young women when they're young, and having that, you know, giving those messages, I think is a really important part of reducing street harassment. Yeah.
Absolutely, Louise. Yeah. So as part of Right to the Streets, what we decided we were going to focus on was age 16 and above. Just because of the kind of funding we had and the interactions we were going to be able to have. We had like these, we have adapted some of the sessions, but on the whole, it's kind of like 2 or 3 hours kind of sessions to explore sexual harassment awareness and how to be an active bystander. Often, in my experience of working with children and young people, you need a kind of longer time to develop a relationship with them, to explore some of the issues. It can be quite complex, I think. It can be quite complex for some adults to kind of take on board some of this stuff. So what we decided to do was train some school staff that were interested and came along to the training. So I mentioned school nurses. I've sent them away with packs of stuff and all the posters and everything else to kind of get them out to their schools. And Trafford College, we're going to be training a whole group of the pastoral staff there that are going to train you on. In terms of freedom, personal safety, we do loads of stuff in schools and colleges. And often we've done some work actually with a school that's been funded by Tracy Brabrin, the Mayor of West Yorkshire. And that has been, we take a whole school approach. So we go into a school, we survey the kids to find out what their real experiences are anonymously. We train all the staff. We work with groups of kids to be kind of almost like peer ambassadors, or to kind of call things out. We get them doing posters and appearing in the posters and calling out this behaviour. And we've got a whole set of campaign materials called Shout, Student Sexual Harassment Out. that we offer to any schools, colleges, universities. And the key thing with that is the messages are aimed at the perpetrators, not at the victims. So it's not report it if it happens. Of course, we want people to report it. We say, this is sexual harassment. Don't do it. It's not tolerated here. So, Sam, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else on that.
Yeah, I mean, just to pick up, there was a sort of legislative theatre event last night, and I think, Ben, you were at that, weren't you? Yes, you were. Yeah, and so people, some of the sort of policy people from around Greater Manchester were there, included people from Transport for Greater Manchester, GM for Women organisations, Greater Manchester Police. There was quite a few, and actually bystander training was a big part of that. So, you know, these were people in positions of, you know, positions where they can influence and make policy. And I think bystander training was a huge it was a big topic last night. So there's definitely a heightened awareness of things like this and a need for it. And people in the audience were requesting that it does go out to, you know, like all of the ticket inspectors on the trams, for example, and so on. So right. Yeah, Ben, you got your hand up. You were there.
Well, so what was interesting was my suggestion for a policy intervention sort of got co-opted and tortured into it being a recommendation for more bystander training, which I do, you know, I can see the perspective. I guess my question, it sort of follows on from Louise's and some of the responses you gave to Louise, actually, that so from within public health, we tend to constantly be focused on upstream, like we're focused on prevention rather than addressing the problem as it arises, and both are important, and I can totally understand the case for bystander training. But when we're thinking about monitoring, evaluation, and shifting the dial, now obviously the whole school approach you talk about is much more intensive, but when you talk about addressing the mindset and the behavior of perpetrators rather than, okay, we'll stop these specific instances. And so I'm just interested in, and it's probably very hard, right? Because reporting rates on this, and again, I'm only saying this because Open Data Manchester are here, right? I would imagine getting reliable data on mindsets of perpetrators, on what proportion of male violence against women happens within a family setting as opposed to on the street or whatever else, you know. But within that whole vision, I guess I'm interested in the sort of the population effectiveness of bystander training, right? Like what proportion of, and I can totally see the argument for targeting the ones on public transport, right? I don't move in the spaces where this stuff happens very frequently, so the benefit of me attending is proportionately less, right? I'm just interested in any thoughts you have on that, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we tend to, as you saw, we're a 2-woman organisation. We know we do punch above our weight, I think, but we also know our limitations in terms of what impact we can have. So what tends to happen is we identify some funding, because we're always looking for funding, because we know schools and a lot of the organisations we work with don't have any money, or they can't put the money into this, even though they believe in it. And then we will say, do you have an issue with something around this kind of topic that we can explore in your organisation, in your community, etc., etc. So we kind of tend to be, we can't carry out research ourselves. We're not specialists in that. And I know there's some specialists in the room. So we tend to kind of almost rely, I guess, Ben, on those partner organisations who say, do you know what, we're hearing increasing incidences of this happening. Or like that one really brave apprentice who said, you need to sort this out. I know someone you can get in to do this. So our work does tend to be on much more of a micro kind of level, really. But I think when you get projects like this one, the Right to Street, and you've got so many different elements, and you have got that real good quality research, and you've got lots and lots of different experiences, and you've got things like the legislative theatre. And I'm so gutted I wasn't there yesterday. I'm so pleased to hear that bystander was talked about quite a lot. I was working at a university away and I couldn't get back in time. I guess I think yeah, I don't have the kind of the capacity or even the kind of the mind to be able to look at it on a more macro level. But yeah, I think when we can work across an organisation, that can have quite an impact.
Yeah, fab. Well, we've got a few more minutes, unless there's any last questions for Julie. We can sort of wrap up. What I would like just to share really, really quickly is I'm going to put a link, because even though Right to the Streets as a project is sort of wrapping up, there still are a few more opportunities to get involved. I think there's a link in the chat box to their Eventbrite page. There's some sort of there's a couple of sort of football tournaments, fundraisers happening over the weekend and also next weekend. But also, if you're around in the Stretford area on Sunday from, I think it's 10 a.m. I'm not sure if it's till 6 or 8, but it's later in the evening. There's a sort of celebration event, and there'll be opportunities to sort of talk to people, workshops to get involved, that kind of summarize and look at sort of the work, further opportunities to get involved. So if you're in Stretford, it's at Stretford Public Hall. If you're in the area, feel free to drop in, and that's on Sunday. So otherwise, if there's no other final questions, just say thank you so much, Julie, for really, really, really great presentation. I really enjoyed that, and thanks to everyone for joining us this lunchtime and for all your questions as well. It's been really nice to see you all. So yeah, have a lovely weekend.
Thank you. I put my email address in the chat if anybody wants to kind of follow up. So yeah,
awesome.
Or you can just find us at Freedom Personal Safety. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I am
Bye.
trying to remember how to stop recording.